Hi. So this is another of the habits of a systems thinker from the Waters Centre. And this is the one I think that really shows and highlights ingenuity. So uses understanding of system structure to identify possible leverage actions. This is understanding the structure so that you can find points to intervene which are smaller than the change you want to deliver. So in the image here, we've got three forms of leverage going on based on the fact that the woman knows the difficulty of getting the fish out of the water and onto land. So you have a long pole, a fishing pole, which is reaching into the water for the fish, the wire, whatever it's called, I'm not a fisher person, being done up. And also at this point here, her foot is on the rock to help give her power to pull that big fish out. These are all leverage points and things that we're leverage actions that help us gain power in a situation. And power is a difficult word, but to make the changes we want to make. So flipping the card over. Uses understanding of system structure to identify possible leverage actions. A systems thinker uses systems understanding to determine what small actions will most likely produce desirable results. So this is understanding what is actually in the system, what is made up, what makes up the system. Using systems mapping, system dynamics and causal loop diagrams, we begin to map out the system, the elements and variables that are involved in the system. And when we start mapping it out, we might know that element A is the thing we really want to impact. But actually, connected to that are a couple of elements that are much smaller, and that if we were to increase element B, that will have a knock-on effect to C, which is attached to element A and is going to increase it. When you take that moment to think about all the elements in the system and how they are connected, that's when you can spot a small change. That's the whole point of a lever. A lever is to move a larger object by a smaller object. So you're putting the lever underneath it and using the length of the pole or whatever it is. So the leverage point is that point at which we can put minimal effort to have a big change. One example that I'm thinking of was an exercise we were talking about the other day of improving the situation of hospital beds, the number of hospital beds and number of patients still in them. Now, that seemed like a really big problem, but mapping out the system, you realise that the nursing staff were understaffed, the morale was low, which meant that they weren't available, some were off sick, they just weren't available to process all these patients. And just one of the suggestions, which I thought was genius, was putting a bowl of sweets, okay, maybe not great for teeth, on the side for the nurses' station, just to increase morale, just to have an impact on morale. And the thing is, if you came to this problem without drawing a map and said, I'm going to put a bowl of sweets on the side here, that's going to really impact hospital beds, it would make no sense at all. But because you can see the map, you can see that morale affects sick leave of nurses, which affects the amount of patients that can be discharged, which affects the number of available hospital beds. You can see that a small change can have a bigger impact further along the line. So it's understanding that structure that is important here. When you understand the structure, not necessarily all of it, but some of it, you can start finding leverage actions. So some of the questions to ask when you're thinking about leverage actions: where might a small change have a long-lasting desired effect? What element of that situation is going to have an impact further along the line, and a long-lasting one? Maybe it isn't directly changing that thing that you're looking at to improve, but maybe it's changing something connected. What small change can I do? How can we use what we know about the system to identify possible leverage actions? How can we use it? It might not be that you change the element that's connected to the one you want to change, but what we know about the system means we've got the thinking space to say, well, how can we influence that element that's connected, rather than just thinking about the problem situation? So how can we use that knowledge? It may not be changing something, but it's changing something related to that. Have that brainstorming session, have those times of thinking about possible options and leverage actions. Are there any other small changes that we've not yet considered that could bring us desirable results? This is the other thing of highlighting the ingenuity. You wonder what it is sometimes when people think, oh, I know, if I do this over here, it'll do this. And wow, that's amazing. How did you do that? This is what is going on. They have got an internal map of what the situation is and can link it together and suggest that change. Are there any other small changes? This is that thinking through. What other options? Don't necessarily jump to the solution of the first one that comes to mind. There may be others. There may be smaller changes that are going to have just as much impact. Keep your mind open. What else is out there? What else could make a difference to your situation? So understanding system structure in order to be able to identify possible leverage actions. This is two things. This is identifying leverage actions, but it's understanding system structure. If you can map out your system, you can understand the structure and you can spot the easiest leverage actions to make a difference to your situation.